Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. This is Natasha Helfer Parker, and I am joined by this amazing couple I get to work with on a weekly basis. And I love them, and they're so wonderful and friendly and loving and smart and savvy. And I always say I'd like to move in next door if I could, but I'm in Kansas,
Absolutely.
so there you go. Anyway, Margi and John Dehlin are joining me. So hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Natasha. Good to be back with you.
Well, it's kind of fun to be the one on this end today.
Yes.
Yeah.
John's usually very good at giving Margi and I tons of nice affirmations, and so it's nice to give it back.
That's right.
All right, so today we're super excited for our topic. We're going to be talking about top issues and tips for Mormon women after a faith crisis or during a faith crisis. And as usual, we kind of are always interested in not only addressing those going through faith crises and transitions, but those who are supporting them. So that means your spouses, your family members, your ward members, people you work with, etc. So there's, I think, a lot of misunderstanding that happens between our communities, and we want to bridge some of those gaps. So we're excited for anybody to join us on any part of the spectrum of Mormonism. We want to talk about our mission. So, John, why don't you give us our mission today? You never give the mission.
All right. I would love to do the mission, and it's fun to have you leading today, Natasha. Our mission can be summarized with the 3 Ps. That's how Margi named it. Positive, practical, and personal tips for navigating a Mormon faith crisis, or for those wishing to understand those experiencing a Mormon faith crisis. So we like this podcast to be believer-friendly, non-believer friendly, affirming and supportive to everyone involved. How's that?
Beautiful.
Love it. Love it. And then Margi, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about kind of what our overall message is then, kind of our overall vision.
Sure. So the idea is that amidst this process, it can feel at times overwhelming. There can be loss. But also, we submit that it has this potential to be a huge gift as well. That it is all kind of part of creating a big, beautiful life. So.
Right, which is a big part of why our logo is yellow and bright and has a seed on it to grow and develop into wonderful things. So I think that's true of all kinds of things. Shifts are usually difficult and hard. We're not creatures that necessarily love change. Even positive change can be really hard and difficult and stressful. And yet it's through those shifts and changes that we get to have new opportunities and new experiences and new territory that we maybe never thought would be possible or even imagined. So that's something that we really like to keep our focus on. A few changes have happened since we first started this project. It was kind of a project in of its own. We have since moved it to be under the umbrella of the Open Stories Foundation. So that now all donations that come through to this project are tax deductible here in the United States anyway. And it just kind of has a little bit more, I think, structural and administrative support that way as well. And so I'm going to turn the time over to John just a little bit so that you can explain because maybe there were some people who were donating a certain way and now need to donate another way. So you want to give a few explanations around that?
Yeah, sure. So if you are donating through the Open Stories Foundation, that's great. If you're one of the early donors that donated through kind of the nonprofit donations, all you have to do is switch over. Just go to MormonFaithCrisis.com, click on the donate button, select whatever monthly donation or annual donation works for you, and then email us and say, hey, please cancel my old donation. Email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com. We'll cancel the old one and make sure you're not getting double charged. And if you're new to the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis, or you're not a donor and you want to see this continue, we're about a fourth of the way there. We've got about 30 donors. We know that hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people are listening already. So if we can just get, let's just say another 100 donors, will be, and again, donations can be as little as 10 or 20 or 25 bucks a month. We think that this delivers a lot more value than that, given that it's hours and hours and hours of content from experts. But if we can just get another, let's just say 100 donors, we'll be on our way to be able to sort of make this sustainable, to be able to pay for the infrastructure and to pay for the time of the participants. So please support us if you can, but thanks to everyone who's supported us so far.
Yeah, this idea of sustainability is really important because we want to be able to continue to offer this. We've gotten a lot of really wonderful positive reviews. I think it is really a helpful resource for many in our community. But yeah, it doesn't come as a free product, right? So we need to be able to cover the expenses. And so please support us if you can. Like John said, any little bit helps. And you talked about, you're getting kind of some experts here to support you. So why don't we talk a little bit about what each one of us does? Margi, do you want to get us started with that?
Sure. So I participate in the podcast. I'm also a certified life coach. I focus in life transition work. So I also have that. And then I write as well. On my blog, you can find all things Margi Dehlin at beautyinthenow.org. And that's me.
Perfect. And John?
Yeah, I have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology, and I run a podcast called Mormon Stories Podcast, and I run a nonprofit called the Open Stories Foundation that runs all this stuff or oversees all this stuff. And if you want to reach out to me for my personal coaching, I focus on mixed faith marriages, individual faith crisis stuff, sometimes LGBTQ related religious stuff. You can reach out to me at johndehlin.com/coaching.
Awesome. And I am a master's level licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. I am also a certified sex therapist through the organization known as ASECT, which I would say is kind of like another mini master's degree. It's what it felt like getting that certification. And you can find everything that I'm about at natashaparker.org. So I run several podcasts as well: Mormon Mental Health, Mormon Sex Info. I run a private practice where you can see me or providers who work for me. And what else do? I do a blog, several things. Anything that I do, you can find at natashaparker.org. And would love to have you visit there and see what other resources you might be interested in. All right, so we usually like to start, well, I guess before we even go there, ways, so we did talk about how you can support us financially, but let's talk a little bit about other non-financial ways that you can support us. So one of the ways that you can do that is just to like our page, like our Facebook page. So that helps us know, first of all, who's interacting with us. And second of all, it helps us just spread social media stuff. You can give us a positive review if you enjoy what we're doing. You can do that either on Facebook, you can do that on iTunes. You can comment and participate during our podcasts that we do. These are interactive. So we ask for you guys to interact with us as we're talking. And you can also share with your friends or family members or social media networks, these things that are happening. You can also help us plan events if you're interested in doing anything geographically in your area. All of us have done kind of faith transition retreats or workshops or things of that nature. And if you can
mixed
have
faith marriage stuff,
if you want anything geographically for us to come, at least one of us or several of us, depending on how many people we could get interested in your area, we are willing to travel and host a workshop or a retreat. So let us know if that's something that you're interested in.
And the email address would be mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and then anything else as far as before we start with what's working aspect that you want to make sure, any announcements or?
Corinne's writing, so thankful for all the amazing work you guys do. Thank you, Corinne. Michelle writes, I'm so excited to be here live. I'm usually at work. So we're glad you could join us, Michelle.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have Thrive coming up, although it is full. That's sad that we have to announce an event that is full, but it's exciting because maybe we'll have another event like that coming up. And also, do you want to talk about, I mean, I know that is it October that I'm doing a workshop in Oklahoma City. Do you want to talk about some of the workshops you have coming up, John and Margie?
We don't have anything on the slate. I'll just say about Thrive that the purpose of Thrive is to create material community content for people seeking healing and joy after Mormonism. The Thrive Conference is going to be in Salt Lake City, June 7th through 9th. It's sold out. It's at the Maverick Center. We've got 300 people pretty much signed up. But we've had such an overwhelming response, we had to turn people away. We're already planning our next Thrive Conference. We hope to have a much larger venue. We hope to make it much more affordable. We've got some donors who are willing to subsidize it so that it can be super cheap. So be looking for Thrive 2, bigger and better, coming to you soon. I just wanted to make sure we announced that.
Awesome.
And also, we finally have up that wonderful webinar you put together on mixed faith marriages. So if any of you want 6 really good hours of Natasha with a little bit of my support and some listeners on how to navigate a mixed faith marriage, you can check us out at mormonfaithcrisis.com/webinars. And on there, you can purchase each of the sessions individually or in aggregate. And spread the word. If any of you, it's like a third the price of 1 hour of coaching, and you get 6 hours of really quality content. We're just trying out this webinar format, but it's quality stuff led by Natasha. So
thanks. Yeah, and the first part of that is kind of understanding faith transitions in a mixed faith context. The second part is marriage focused, and the third part is parenting focused, which is a lot of the questions we get in mixed marriage type of settings. So I'm really excited to get that out, and hopefully many of you can find that to be a resource on top of the many other things that we're doing here at Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. All right, so why don't we go ahead and start with we like to start with the what's working category of our program, mainly because we want to talk about positive things and share ideas. And we also love it when you all share ideas with us about what's working. So these can be big momentous things or tiny little daily habits or whatever you can think of as something that is working for you at this particular time in your life and helping you have good mental health, good relational health, good spiritual health, whatever it is that you consider benefiting your life. So Margie, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. So one thing I've always loved is this kind of space and time in the evening when we feel like the kids are mostly cared for and John and I can head into the bedroom and we enjoy a show together. So a show that's really been a refreshing addition, I feel like, is Bless This Mess. And it stars Dax Shepard and Lake Bell. And we love it. It's basically city people that take to the country. They inherit a house and want to all of a sudden try to be farmers. And so, and it is delightful and funny. And so we've just really enjoyed that. So that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing was I noticed at our local art cinema here in town, this movie called The Biggest Little Farm. And it's a documentary, similar content, however, like true story. And it takes place an hour outside LA. If you're into it all, like Michael Pollan, food, whole food, working with nature, how nature informs our experience as human beings, I cried in it. It was beautiful. I mean, just animals, working with nature, relationships. What do you think, babe? Did you end up liking it?
Yeah, super interesting. Biggest Little Farm. Really good documentary.
Yeah, and it ended up also being at our mainstream theater, so you can kind of check it out. Hopefully it's hit you mainstream as well. Otherwise, you can look for it in a little while and maybe give it a rent and see what you think. But those are two sort of media sources that are making us feel more alive or, laugh or so. that's what's working for me.
Well, we just found, bless this mess, my daughter and I, and we are peeing our pants because we live here in Kansas, right?
Isn't it so funny?
And on top of it, the lady's like a therapist. So the whole
Yes,
thing
right?
has all of these
I love the female character.
Now, my husband, who is from Kansas, he's not laughing as hard as me and Isabella are laughing, but it's hilarious.
Oh, how funny.
So do you guys wear Depends? Do you wear Depends when you watch it, or how do you deal with that? I'm just curious.
That's what I gotta start wearing. John, what's working for you these days?
So what's working for me is exercising with Margi. So I, for the past year or so, I had a health club membership, and that's worked well for me, but I sometimes get busy and I don't do it. And so Margi has agreed to work out with me 3 times a week in the morning, where we don't go to a health club, but we kind of do, let's just say 15 or 20 minutes of exercises in our room, like sit-ups and push-ups and plank and lunges and things like that. And then we go outside and run for 15 or 20 minutes up and down a hill outside our house. And I really like the bonding that it does for us, but also the extra encouragement that I get and the expertise. So I've always said everyone deserves to have a Margi, and it's been really nice to partner with Margi for exercise.
Awesome. All right. I think what's working for me this week is, because Memorial Day was yesterday, we actually drove an hour and a half to like a family cemetery and saw some of the graves. And we have, on my husband's side of the family, we have a World War I veteran and a World War II veteran. So it was very interesting. And so we started talking to the kids about kind of like family history. We haven't done that in a while. I don't know why we haven't done that. I don't know if it's because I'm not as genealogy focused as before. But it was really interesting, especially now that they're more teenagers, in my home anyway. They were really interested. They were even shushing each other so that they could hear what we were talking about, and just kind of wanting to know what our heritage is from, what kinds of countries our ancestors come from, experiences, they asked us even about like conversion stories, because we don't come from pioneer stock. So like, how did people become Mormon in our family to begin with? And it was really lovely. So it's just a reminder that kids are actually at some points interested in where they come from. So let's make sure we keep that tradition up.
That's great.
Beautiful.
All right. So I think moving in to our topic for today. So we thought that, we've been doing a lot of different topics on so many things, but I do think that there are certain things that are more specific to females and to males when going through a faith transition. So today we're going to focus on women and some of the things that tend to come up. I think, at least I see a pattern of things that tend to come up for women as they're thinking differently about their faith structure and their background in Mormonism. The next one we'll do is on men. So we'll do both, because I think that there's really some interesting things on both sides of that equation. So, so again, interact with us. But one of the first things that I had thought about is, there's this huge push in Mormonism towards the motherhood identity, and choices about family planning. And I think that we, in general, encourage, there's a lot of pressure. It's, I think, even more than just encouragement. I think there's pressure to marry early, to have children, and to not wait to have children. So many women that are in my office going through faith transitions are in a position where they've had children at a very early age, many times having put their educational goals or career goals aside, which is a whole nother kind of, that's my number 2 identity crisis. I think that, one of the tasks of faith transitioning is kind of reworking our identity. So this is kind of what we're talking about today for women: motherhood identity, and very tied to that is career or education identity. And all the choices that were made, and sometimes people feel like, were those choices that really I made, or that were made for me, or that I would have made differently if I hadn't had that type of pressure or ideas of what it meant to be a righteous woman or a mother? Or, you also get into all the kinds of thoughts of women who maybe didn't enjoy mothering as much as they thought they would or should, because of all the pressure of that being such a primary aspect of our identity. So I thought we'd start out with that, with the aspect of motherhood identity, and maybe very closely followed with career identity. Any thoughts from either one of you as we get that thought started?
Yeah, one of my kind of initial thoughts is this idea too, of almost, that formula. There's kind of an age, there's sort of a formula that, is put up as ideal. And ironically, I feel like it happens right at the same time that a natural process of self-exploration would happen. And so what I find a lot of times with coaching clients is this sense of, who am I? Like, how do I even go about reclaiming or picking up myself all these years later? And you have this sense that that whole stage and process was usurped. So you do have this, natural role of motherhood, but you also have it at a time when, there might be a natural self-exploration process, a natural testing out of what do I like, what do I want to pursue for me personally, as well as, when do I want to mother? Is that something, like all of that tied to who we are and listening to our voices is kind of, that whole process is taken away as it's plugged in. You're given it, And so that's one thing that I reflect on, is oftentimes in coaching, you almost go back to pick that up. You go back to sort of a self-exploration process that might have happened quite naturally in your 20s had the formula not been so set.
Can we, I would love you, Margi, and then Natasha, for you, I'd love each of you to talk about personally, not just in the abstract theoretical, but like what personally, regarding your identity and your choices, your regrets, your anger, your grieving, what did you have to grapple with regarding motherhood in your faith transition? Do you mind being personal?
Not at all. Just where to start.
I know. Actually, this reminds me, John, the very first time you interviewed me, the very first time, gosh, that was years ago. And you asked some question about, well, and how does that fit in with your identity as a woman? And I was like, oh man, that's a whole nother podcast, mister. As far as, because you were asking me, about my career and being a Mormon woman and all that. And I was like, I felt the same way, Margie. I didn't even know where to start.
I can start with a couple ideas. I don't know. I would probably have to really process and really go deep. But a couple things that come to mind for me would be, on a level, how I allowed the structure to usurp my voice. And so, and even in our conversations about things like, I remember when we were first dating and I brought up the idea of working part-time.
Wait, but before we talk about work, I think that's second. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, the motherhood?
But motherhood first.
In particular?
So like, I remember discussions around number of kids. And this is always difficult because what parents going to say they regret, one or two of their kids or five of their kids or all of their kids. But we did have some of those talks about how many kids to have and just about motherhood specifically. Yeah. And again, I'm sorry for stopping you, but
sticking with motherhood. Yeah. Okay. The first thing that I can think of, and this is something I see with a lot of women, is, I moved from this high achievement structure, right, in college. So I loved school. I loved going to school. I loved the whole process of learning. And I also was competing, right? So I was competing nationally. And I really loved competitive running. I loved and so then I felt like I had this kind of large life where so many parts of me were emerging. They were just coming to be, coming into fruition. And I was super excited. And what I feel like inevitably happened was, and there are great things about roles, so I want to be balanced here. And I loved my time, honestly. Many choices for women, many ways of being. And I really felt for motherhood in particular. But what it did was, because I didn't feel empowered to diversify, is it shrunk my world to this one thing, right? And so I became this overachiever in momhood because I had no other realm, right? It just made my world so small. So I really started reading a ton of books, but I feel like it sort of took over my identity, and it took a thing that could have been a part of me, and it made all of me for, more than a decade of that intense mothering, and, that it just kind of oftentimes requires. So I feel like it kind of usurped all these different aspects. And then, of course, all the achievement kind of went into this thing that honestly is meant to be enjoyed, is meant to be, kind of savored. It's not really healthy to have so much of your self-concept connected to your children, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I honestly, that kind of, and I'm not sure how healthy that was for me. And it took a lot of time for me to disentangle all of that later. That's one thing that comes to me off the bat. And I see that with a lot of women really who are put into that world. They love mothering, but the fact that it is so dominant, it is so defining that there's like this inner frustration. They have this inner discontentment, struggle within them because at one point they had all these outlets. Yeah. And now really it's become one.
If I can just jump into that, and this is about you. I remember, when I met you and you were on a nationally ranked cross-country team and really into your studies and literature and writing and academics, and you had this dream of getting a master's degree in literature and maybe teaching at a college. And then I'm like, well, I'm graduating and we're going to get my job. So you either come with or I'm going without you. It was just very Mormon, and I remember, and this is getting personal, but like, I remember coming home from work in Chicago or Dallas, and like, it seemed like every other day the furniture was rearranged, or you were cutting your hair and cutting your hair again and cutting your hair again. And I internalized that as just like, what is wrong with this woman? Who is this woman that I married? Like, she's rearranging the furniture and cutting her hair multiple times. What I think took me way too long to realize was that as important as like breastfeeding and feeding a baby and changing diapers and, doing laundry and all the things you do as a young mother with young kids, you had lost really important parts of you. And you were and it's not that you didn't love motherhood, you did, and you took it really seriously, but I think the limitations or the narrow scope of motherhood kind of left you maybe feeling undervalued, maybe feeling stir crazy. And really, I think, had significant mental health implications for that first 5 or 10 years at least. And I just don't think we went into our marriage with any sensitivity around that. And again, going to number of kids, you had sort of been a very active daughter, almost helping raise some of your younger siblings. And you had felt kind of tired. But I had 4 kids in my family, and I'm like, we got to have 4 kids. You were leaning more towards 2. I was like, we got to do 4, maybe 6. So we kind of settled on 4, but it kind of wasn't fully your decision. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't mean to talk over you, but tell me if those reflections resonate with you.
It definitely, yeah, it definitely resonates a bit with me. And so, and I even think I love that you brought up the idea of choices, Natasha, this idea of, people going back and really trying to process, wait, did I choose that? It doesn't like, I'm not sure that was an actual choice in that I was conscious of what I was choosing. And I think that's a really true thing as well. This idea that, and I find that takes some grief work, that takes some loss work, especially before we're able to kind of, in this stage now, maybe pick up some of those pieces. And we can talk about that on the other side, kind of the good now that kind of comes from that. But yeah, I do feel like, trying to navigate my way, and that patriarchal kind of being unsure of my voice, and then feeling like there were times when I did actually use my voice, but it was usurped. Those are things that are painful, that require processing. And now on the other side, I'm clearly very sensitive to, which can cause a dynamic in marriage that also has to kind of become. But what are some things that come out for you, Natasha?
And motherhood.
Yeah, I think, well, and even just the choice conversation, I always try to remind myself and everybody that comes through my door is that it's not like in our 20s we're super wise and know every single choice we're going to make. So I try to remember that, as I go back and think about things that, we're fairly easily influenced in our 20s, and lots of things are going on developmentally, right? So I'm just trying to keep that perspective. But things that come up for me around motherhood is I definitely wanted to be a mom. I don't know. That's another thing. I don't know how natural that was versus how much that was just told to me, right? So that's, I think, where we even start. It's like, was I just naturally mom-like and loved being a mom, or was that just, I was a pleaser and I want to do what's right, and so of course I was going to be a mom. I don't know that I'll totally figure that out. I also was the oldest and definitely parented my siblings in some ways, like definitely played a role in that, not inappropriately necessarily, but just, as an older sibling, you kind of play that role sometimes. And I wanted to have, the 4 kids. I wanted to have 4 kids. And I definitely remember a lot of that, that idea that the spirits were waiting for us to bring them down. I did feel that kind of responsibility that if I wasn't going to have children, I was holding somebody back from this experience. So that's kind of a weird thing now to contemplate, right? Like, why was I having like guilt for, what potentially could be bajillions of spirits, if that's, if that's a true concept. But whether I had 4 or 6 or 2, that doesn't make a huge dent in the billions. But for me, I felt that weight. Mm-hmm. And then I chose to continue my studies and get myself to a point where I could have a career and stay at home. But that meant that we were married for 4 years before we chose to have children. So that always felt very like I wasn't doing the right thing, and that I wasn't being really righteous or really faithful or trusting in Heavenly Father per se. So I had those feelings. And then when it came to the last thing I remember about motherhood in particular was when it came to the final decision. And I don't know if this was hormonal or if it was like, you just get used to loving a baby. At least I did. That I was like, let's have 5. I wasn't ready to stop. And Andy was like, what? Because he's like, I could barely do the 4, and so we did the classic thing that Mormons do, right? Which is we went to the temple and we sat there and, and I thought for sure I had that whole thing that of course he's going to get the right answer. He's going to get my answer in the temple, right? With me, and we're going to be fine. And we're going to have this 5th baby that I had already attached myself to. And yeah, that ended up being a huge disaster for us because he didn't walk away from that experience any more excited to have a baby. And I and then I think I went into that whole righteous narrative that we have, because if this is what the church is telling us we should do, I'm obviously getting the right answer, Andy, and you must be doing something wrong and getting the wrong answer, right? And then in my view at that time, it felt very much like, in this weird way that I don't really agree with now, I felt like patriarchy, like his being a man usurped my desire to have my fifth baby. So it was a really weird way to think about negotiation as a couple, and to really bring that, because that's getting my way isn't what solving patriarchy is about either, right? I mean, when you're in a couple, you're supposed to negotiate these things as a couple, as a man and a woman, or if you're in a homosexual relationship, as both sexes. So it was really interesting to me to think back on all that, but all the grief and the meaning making I made around that particular issue was at that point devastating to me. There was like this lost spirit that I never got to have. So those were all negatives. The one positive I will say about Mormonism and mothering, especially being in a career as well, is that the Mormon space was the only space that really respected my mothering. Okay, so my outside world, especially when I started having 3 or 4 children, they would all look at me like I was kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? And so I never got the I never got the affirmation or the honor or the respect in my non-Mormon world, as far as all the work I was doing as a mother, as I did in the Mormon world, that definitely kind of cheerleaded me in that role in lots of ways. Now, that's coming from my personal perspective. I never dealt with infertility. I never dealt with, major miscarriages. I never dealt with lots of other issues. And I felt comfortable in my role of mothering, although there's always the mother guilt, right? I was never the right type of mother. I never did enough, like we do in all kinds of forms of kind of perfectionist Mormonism. So I didn't hold family home evening enough. I didn't do scripture study enough. I didn't do, I did, but I always felt subpar. There was always something else I could have been doing. And that definitely took a toll on me, mental health wise, for sure.
I so relate to that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do feel like I was hustling prior to motherhood. And what it did was it made me hustle inside. And then you have this kind of, not just a religious structure, but a cultural structure as well, with regard to kind of what a good mother looks like, what are good children, and I do feel like when your life becomes so one-dimensional, it's really natural to start comparing. And that's something that I noticed some comments on our thread talking about, is just you have this idea of what a perfect Mormon mother looks like, talks like, what her children are. I think we all can sort of bring that picture up of what, and so even if you are aware of that and conscious of that, and even, really trying to fight against that, it's still something that's omnipresent in what you're doing. And I think I really had a perfectionism hustle in this one dimension of my life, and it started to eat me alive. It really did. It definitely compromised my emotional and mental state and my feelings of being a worthy human as I am, and what I had to contribute to the world, And
yeah, that goes right along with, give her a kiss. I want to give her a kiss too. I think that, all of our kids struggle too, right? Like, who raises perfect kids, right? And so kids struggle, whether with grades or mental health issues of their own or attitude, whatever ways. And so then it's very easy in that narrative that you're talking about to blame it on yourself. I didn't hustle enough, right? And that's why my kid is now struggling in this particular way. If we had only done A, B, C, or D, which again, we tend to do in Mormon equational philosophies. We love equations in Mormonism. Although I do want to say this is not something that I think is unique to Mormonism. I think we have our own unique kind of steroid approach to this in Mormonism. but I see lots of my non-Mormon friends struggling with a lot of these same things. And what I think we also have to remember is that it's only been a generation or two where we had more choices as women, regarding education or not getting married, or, you know, even financial stability on your own, etc. And so these are themes that are running millennially deep in so many of us.
And I so see that too. Yep.
You add the Mormon sprinkle in there and it's even worse.
Yep.
We're getting so many wonderful comments, and we posted some questions around Facebook and on Reddit, and we have been flooded with really good comments and questions. So we're going to take questions now and comments, but we're also going to reserve time next week to drill more into the amazing comments and questions that people have left all over Facebook as well. So,
well, Debbie Holly says, hold on there, Natasha. My kids are perfect. So.
Absolutely. Well, good for her. Good for you, Debbie.
Save her, Debbie. Save her.
But the only point I'm making is just that we're going to cover some of your comments and questions now. Please share them live. And then if we don't get to yours, we're going to try and get to them next week. But having said that, let's just share some of the comments that have been made. Jana writes, just jumping on, I love this idea of self-exploration. Now is a very late time for that, and I can't go back. So Jana also writes, I had, 8 kids. I would never have had that many. So Jana, our hearts go out to you. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable. Christy is really liking the idea of savoring, and sometimes in the Mormon frenetic, many children lifestyle, savoring there isn't time for savoring. I'm not going to say that's true for everyone, but Christy's resonating with that concept. Patricia writes, I always had wanted to be a mom. I wanted a lot of kids. We have 7, 2 adopted because after 5, my body had a hard time. My husband, I think, would not have had as many. Also, our 2 adopted kids are special needs. And then Patricia writes a happy note. Now I'm doing more things for myself that I would always put aside. Margie, do you want to read Michelle's comment?
Sure. I realized that being a mother was part of me, not all of me. That is a novel concept to some. So agree.
And then Corinne's connecting with you.
Yes, I was a furniture rearranger too. Yes, we're in good company, I feel like, Corinne. Like, there are many a woman that, rearrange furniture, and that's a creative outlet.
Martine's sends her love. Hey, Martine. Jana writes about hair and furniture. Do you want to share?
Margie was trying to be creative. Hair and furniture was all she had. Love you, Margi Weber Dehlin. You know what's funny about that? But actually 2 times when, in those kind of early childbearing years, I cut my hair entirely off. And when I think back to that, like a pixie cut, and one time it was with natural hair. It was right after my oldest child was born. And then the next time was after Clara was born, and I actually dyed it platinum. So I had a pixie cut twice, once platinum. But I really do, looking back to that, feel like there's something indicative of like a spiritedness of like, I'm being put in a box, but man, I'm going to just defy here if I can. Or
imagine Margie with like the Susan Powers crew cut, like Annie Lennox platinum blonde crew cut.
I feel like it was a little more Mia Farrow, to be honest, but
it was awesome.
I think the platinum started out a little more biker chick, moved into kind of a softer Mia Farrow. But anyway.
Lisa writes, the symbolism of Margie cutting off her hair is hurting me.
Yeah.
She has a tear. I think she's actually being heartfelt.
No, I mean, that is a part that I can connect to and see meaning in now, right? And that oftentimes happens as you transition, as you can go back to your story with kind of the wisdom and perspective you have now and see yourself in these different ways, in a fuller way.
Patricia's asking, Margie, if you stopped going to school to raise your kids.
So there's kind of a story with that, in that, so we got married my last semester of college, and I went ahead and finished independent study as well as going to like a junior college wherever we lived. And
It took years.
That semester took me until my Maya was born, and that was probably 4 years into our marriage. I graduated with my bachelor's. Really difficult for me to wrap my brain around that, for as much as my friends were shocked, absolutely shocked that I left school.
And I was oblivious. I was just like, you're coming with me, finish your school elsewhere. If I had one big regret, or one of several big regrets, it's that I was just insensitive to how hard it is to like finish your education through correspondence or through community colleges. I mean, it was fine. She did it, but it's a totally different animal. You don't have the same time to really absorb and connect and to communicate with students and professors. And I wish I had just said, you know what, we're staying at BYU another semester or two and letting you finish. My job can wait. But I was just really insecure about providing, and I got a good job offer, and it just wasn't in my mindset.
It's kind of that role conversation.
Yeah.
This is the system we grew up in. There was nobody saying that you should have done anything different, John, or that you should have done anything different, Margie, right? This is where we need to really look at the systems we come from. And instead of self-blame or partner blame, it's like, we were following a narrative and a script that was really strong, really powerful. And it's okay to regret and to consider things, but I think we need to also lay a lot of the responsibility on the system.
Natasha, we're going to skip some of these comments because they're about the career portion, but if you can jump down to the bottom, there's a comment by Corinne and a comment by Kara that I'd love you to read, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Corinne says, usurp is such a perfect word to describe what being a Mormon woman is. You feel like your decisions were chosen for you by men who cannot relate or fully understand your experience within the mold. And then Kara says, since leaving, I've struggled with knowing how to make decisions because the LDS Church made all my decisions for me. I never wanted kids, but in the back of my mind, I knew I would have them because it was what was expected of me by the church. I have felt since leaving, I really don't know who I truly am. I'm almost 30 and don't know how to make decisions. It's so frustrating. I also didn't truly think about a career because I didn't think I would actually work. I knew I needed to go to school just in case. So I don't feel I took my career decisions seriously.
Yes.
So common and so heartbreaking, Kara. Thank you. And we're so sorry.
And this is too, where I'll say, like, even though at one point I wanted 5 kids, like now thinking back, I'm like, I would have been fine with 2 or 3. Like kids take a lot out of you physically, emotionally, time-wise. And that's why I wonder like how much of that wanting kids was just kind of me following my own script, of that's what you should want. So I have enjoyed mothering and I've hated mothering. I've done a lot of both. But I as I've gotten older, I recognize the toll it took on me physically and everything. So, yeah.
Do you want to read Brittany's comment really quick? She threw one in about schooling.
I can relate to finishing school slowly. I went back and started school online through USU 2 weeks after my twins were born. It took me 5-ish years to do a 1.5 years worth of school. In a real sense, I didn't even realize I could have done things differently. Yes.
Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.
All right, Natasha, should we jump to the career part next?
Yeah, and this I think is just so closely tied to it because so much of first of all, I don't know that we are encouraged to really consider a professional identity. I think that most Mormon women, although education is, encouraged and going to school is encouraged, it's always kind of like as a backup plan, like go get as much schooling as you can get done. When you stay at home,
elementary ed, do a couple years as elementary ed teacher.
Do something like in case your husband, dies, or divorces you or becomes disabled, right? So that you can provide if you have to.
Something short and convenient,
Do something that, if you're going to work, it won't interfere too much. So elementary education, of course, is a big one, because then you're working while the kids are generally in school, right? And not weekends or summers or things like that.
And of course, that puts you almost at the poverty level sometimes in terms of the income and benefits you get.
Right.
Not always, but
it's a any female-driven career is going to be much less, much less compensated. That's a whole nother social justice issue, right? And so
my sisters were taught by my mom, a woman only needs 2 years of college.
Right. So
just long enough to meet a man at college, basically.
Meet a man, especially meet somebody professional who's going to be able to provide for you, right? Things like that. I mean, there's the age-old joke that you go to get your MRS, right, at college. And again, it wasn't just Mormons that would talk that way. I mean, there's other, Christian or more traditional denominations that talk that way. But the professional identity wasn't ever something that was about you, what you really loved or what you really were passionate about. It was more about, in case you need something, what would that something be? And make sure that it's something that fits in line with your main role, which is to be a stay-at-home mother, right? As much as possible. And then, of course, we really only honor mothers who work if they have to work. So single moms, or moms who have, the man who has a disability or things of that nature, widows, etc. Any other mom, and I definitely felt this pressure, of like, why are you working, or why are you taking time away from your home when you don't have to, because I had a spouse who happened to have a fairly decent job, right? So I don't have to work. Although the have to, that's also a whole nother level of judgment, because these days it's pretty hard to have a middle class kind of run-of-the-mill lifestyle on one income here in the United States. If you want to have just simple pleasures like piano lessons, or I'm not talking about, going on vacation and cruises every year. I'm talking about just having 2 vehicles and having kids in sports and having, just a little bit extra money to go on a camping vacation. Most families these days need 2 incomes to pull that kind of lifestyle, middle class lifestyle off here in the United States anyway. So those are all, I think, really, really difficult things. And I've heard many women in my office, and I'll talk about it personally as well, really struggling, and especially in a faith transition, when they're oftentimes thinking, do I want to stay married? Do I want to continue what I'm doing? To have zero, as far as, if you're in your 30s or 40s, have zero educational background or professional training, can feel experience, right? So maybe they did get a degree, but they never got a job to follow up with that. So their resume is nothing, compared to other women who they're competing against, can feel, I think, extremely daunting, scary. It keeps them feeling trapped. I hear the word trapped so many times. I feel trapped. And then, of course, the anger. Why did anybody tell me? Why didn't anybody show me? Why didn't anybody encourage me? Why didn't anybody support my original ideas and dreams, right, or goals? So it's just incredibly heartbreaking to sit with that. And even me, I'm a career person, but all along the way, I sacrificed my career. All along the way, I wanted to go to medical school. I have all my pre-meds done. I started thinking, is medical school really what the lifestyle that my children would need? How many Mormon men don't go to medical school because of what their Mormon children need, right? In fact, they go to medical school because of what their Mormon children need, right? So I stopped that dream, and I thought about counseling, because again, I felt like, okay, here's something that I can maybe be flexible around. But I knew I could not be flexible while I was getting my license, which is why I did the 4 years of getting my license and working full time, before having kids, because I wanted to be able to stay at home with my kids. So I did that really fast, got my license, got my degree, did the 4-year full-time kind of thing so that I could stay at home, feeling guilty the whole time because I was married, right? And then as soon as the kids came, way back, gave up all my regular jobs, I would keep my toe in the door, like 3 clients a week, and then every time I build a practice, we'd move and I'd follow my provider husband. I'd have to start all over again. These days with online stuff, that's shifted things dramatically in my field, but it's very hard to pick up and start a new practice. And I did that like 3 or 4 times during the kids being little. And do you think I was prioritizing writing or research, or I was just barely making it, as far as in my profession. So when I think about, my husband's earning capacity, and when I think about my earning capacity, it pisses me off, right? Because I actually have just as much earning capacity as he does, but I never dedicated myself the same way he was able to dedicate himself to the career and all the goals that we have, right? Every time I think about the book that I want to write and with you, John, and stuff, I just get, because a lot of that for me is my mothering that gets in the way of that, not other things, So it's just, I think that whether you have a career or whether you don't, whether you have training, whether you don't, whether you did a halfway thing or whether or not, it's still, there's always something there that there wasn't room to prioritize or have the same experience our male counterparts did. Mm-hmm. Because our male counterparts were expected to be parents and fathers and to focus on careers. Now, I do think there's issues there for males as well, and I'll save that for when we talk about male issues, because I don't think this also has some issues for males as well, as far as the messages they got. But for us as women, I think that I see so much pain and heartache and fear and truly being unprepared for life, which I think is a disaster for our young women to not really have preparation. I don't want to be in a relationship with my husband because I feel like I have to be.
That's right.
I want to be in a relationship with my husband because I kind of want to be. And I say kind of because, that shifts every day. I don't want to feel
just like keeping it real.
Many women feel in my office like, if I was really to leave, if I was really to think about that decision, what would I do?
Yeah.
What would I do? And how would that impact our financial assets, our lifestyle? It's lots of other things that would impact too, divorce, but that oftentimes is the primary thing that women are thinking about. And then a lot of these women supported their husbands through medical school and through, lawyer school and through dental school. And, and then if they do divorce in their 30s and 40s, the earning potential of that man goes forward exponentially in ways that their divorce decree, even a good one, will never support her in the time, the effort, and the investment that she put into that marriage financially. Because she will only get assets up to that point of their relationship. So the whole system is set up very, very poorly for women who have not been able to pursue their own dreams and careers and earning potentials.
Yes.